pretty soon I figured, okay, what's behind this is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And my immediate reaction was, fuck.
Hey, this is Bjorn, and this is the Blindfeed podcast, your no bullshit guide to meaningful work. We openly talk to people who do remarkable work and who found interesting ways to better understand themselves and the people they work with. In today's episode, we talked to Tina North, currently head of growth at EyeEm, one of the world's leading photo and video websites. She's also ambassador Berlin chapter for Women in AI. And with Tina, we go into an incredible life and career journey, and also how she sees drives in other people, how her desire to learn something, basically her curiosity, overcomes her fear to actually learn something that seems so daunting as, for example, artificial intelligence. We really hope you enjoyed this conversation. It was something that was really inspiring for us being there as well and learning from Tina, and we hope you do as well.
Tina North, so welcome for you to be here. Like, it was super cool that you actually took our invite on such a short notice, like after we saw your great adventure of transitioning from marketing at Zalando, having to sort of like reinvent yourself and go into the exploration of AI. It really inspired us as a team here also at Blindfeed, and we thought, shit, like we really need to talk to Tina and like get to know her. So thank you, welcome for being here. Yeah, like we already had a quick chat before, right? When people come in, most of the time people think, oh, just like we start cold, but that's never really the case. Yeah, can you give a bit of a short intro for the people who are listening about like where you come from, how you ended up here, first at Zalando, now at EyeEm, where you are, like head of growth, and your journey so far.
Hi, I'm Tina and I am a marketing expert from Berlin. I have a very mixed professional background. I'm from content, but also I have a tech background, and also I'm into marketing with a focus on search engine optimization. So that's a little bit my expertise.
And like, what was for you like the biggest trigger for people who are not aware that you went from marketing into this like more like passionate obsession about AI?
Yeah, so this happened when I was working as a content strategist at Zalando. Mm-hmm. So as a strategist, you always have to look into the future, right? You have to see what's coming up and what might influence the customer behavior, the customer expectations. Mm-hmm. So this was part of my job. And in late 2016, voice search came up. So like there are three things that happened at that time. Mm-hmm. And I call this the 3 V's. The first thing was voice search. So actually the Google Home and the Alexa, so Amazon Echo, mm-hmm. were launched and conquering the living rooms, basically. Which was huge. I mean, the media reacted immediately, like pushed these devices massively. So this was something I was looking at. Mm-hmm. The second one was visual search. Visual search popped up because Zalando was at that time talking about personalization. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to personalize the whole website experience. And one of the inspiration sources was Pinterest. And at that time, Pinterest just launched the in-image search. So basically you could zoom into an object in an image and then see similar pictures with exactly that object. And I saw this and it basically blew me away. I remember that moment. I was like, wow, just imagine you could take every image you see somewhere and just zoom in and buy what you see. I mean, this is so easy. It's so convenient, right? Yeah. And the third thing that was happening was that video content was more popular than text content. So if you look at Google Trends and mm-hmm. the search volume for example, fashion blog and fashion video, in 2016 the lines crossed. So basically video content became more popular. So that's why I call it the 3 V's, like mm-hmm. Voice search, visual search, mm-hmm. video content. And I wasn't familiar with voice and visual search at that time at all. Mm-hmm. And I looked into it, and pretty soon I figured, okay, what's behind this is artificial intelligence. Yeah. And my immediate reaction was, fuck.
And why was it fuck?
Because it meant it's techie. Yeah, I mean, it was somehow obvious that it's techie, but I mean, AI at that point was for me something like magical.
Like I was in a black box.
I mean, it was like far off. Like this sounded like rocket science. And I was convinced this is something I would never understand. I was always bad in mathematics. It was never something I was good at. Or I also tried coding once in school and I failed miserably. So I somehow figured, okay, this is going in this direction and I will never understand it. And the thing was that this visual search from Pinterest triggered me so much that my curiosity was bigger than the fear. So I basically said, okay, fuck, I mean, there need to be some research papers about AI which are not technical. So I just started looking for stuff like that. And I actually found several ones. Mainly from the US actually, and I just started reading. And I was able to learn so much about this without looking at the technical background that I just kept on going and going and going.
Then you went down the rabbit hole.
I went down the rabbit hole, actually, yes.
That's super interesting. Like it's I think it's one of those things that you said that really like sparked a little light in me was that you said like I found a way that my curiosity was bigger than my fear, right? It's most of the time where people actually get like moving because most of the stuff freaks us out that is new. How has that journey now like helped you like see the world differently when you, for example, have to deal with adversity?
So, I mean, this was what I just told you, was just the beginning of a long journey. And the point where I figured that I can actually learn everything I want came much later. But this was the result of this journey. And this learning was extremely positive and motivating for me because it's really true. If you have this intrinsic motivation, if you're really passionate about something, you can learn anything. It doesn't matter if you were bad at it in school or if you were like having this wall in your head or this voice in your head saying you can't do it. If you have the motivation from your inner self, it's possible. And that was a very positive experience. And I from that point on, I started to look more openly at things. I'm more open for new stuff. And I think the process I'm in is not finished. So for example, right now I'm looking at studying again or like different options, how I can increase my knowledge in areas which I maybe never would have dreamed of.
So what are now areas that you're like thinking about that spark your curiosity?
Well, right now it's still very AI driven. So I think about machine engineering, and I have a lot of respect because I have friends who studied machine engineering, and I know how difficult that is, specifically the math part. I think I'm going to do like an online training first, like to get an impression. Like carefully.
Like dip your toe, it's a bit cold.
So I'm going to dip my toe into certain things and see how it feels and how far I can go, and then maybe it's a bigger decision in the end. We will see. Or maybe I fail. It's also fine because then I just know, okay, I can do it, and that's fine because I mean, not everyone can do everything. That's just how it is.
And how, for example, do you now see like AI as like a general movement in tech, right? So I think there's a lot of interesting parts in there. I think there's been really good TED Talks about, like, for example, the biases that we have are kind of like incorporated often into the AIs, where there's like I think there was a really clear example a couple of years ago already where it was like a soap dispenser. I think even that like engineers were making a soap dispenser and we put our hand underneath, the soap comes out. But as soon as somebody was African American, put their hand out, no soap came out.
Wow.
And they're like what's happening here, right? And they only found it out when the whole product was finished and it was already like in the hotels. I think there was like one of those moments they like, holy crap, nobody tested this, like with like people from different like colors of skin, because the thing was that the laser sensor didn't pick up and reflected it back. And like, so how do you see AI that always will have some biases at this moment like involved compared to sort of like the ideal world that we want to live in? Like, what do you think are the biggest challenges to deal with that?
So first of all, I think the AI itself is not biased. I think the AI just makes it visible, makes our bias visible, right? So, I mean, an AI or an algorithm is only as good as the human who sets it up or who programs it. So, actually, I think it's great in a way that AI, mirrors us. So it makes visible what was happening previously in our heads, and no one was able to see it, right? So if I am HR responsible and I'm selecting the next candidate for a job, and in my head there's bias, and that's why I prefer a man over a woman, for example. It wasn't visible. It was happening in the head of that person.
We didn't even think it was a problem, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So there was no way to tell. But now that algorithms scan the resumes, and those algorithms are basically built based on the bias of a real person, they make it visible. And this is actually, it's not good, but like the way they make it visible is a good thing, because it caused this movement and this massive increase in research on this topic. And there's an awareness now, and there's a discussion going on in the public about this, and I think this is actually a very good thing. So, but we are really at the beginning of this movement and of this discussion. So I know that 2018 was kind of a breakthrough year for research in that field. There are a lot of amazing scientists who try to solve that, but actually there is no real solution in place yet. And I also doubt that algorithms will ever be completely, this is not, I mean, just because it's mathematics and just because it's data, we have somehow the misconception that the decisions or the information those algorithms provide are always correct. And that's just not true. It's just another piece of information, and it depends, the algorithm delivers, and it depends on the human, what we do with it. In the future, I think there has to happen a lot, actually. So there need to be regulations, for example, to force companies to make their algorithms more transparent, and to also provide insights on the data source they are using. On the other hand, this is also, again, a security risk. You cannot make everything transparent.
There's an IP risk probably as well, right, for companies that, well, this is why we're worth so much.
And these are topics we need to discuss on a broader level, and where we need to find solutions from my point of view.
When, I think it was interesting what you said there is that, it sort of exposes the stuff that's going on in our head, right? I think that's also where people in general in the workplace, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in their head, and we're constantly trying to figure out why we like a certain person over another, right? And it can have to do with a lot of variables. It can be for some with differences in personality, or you look indeed very different than me, or you have a different background than me, and it creates all this mess in our head that leads to misunderstanding. What have you seen that's been helpful for people to have better conversations with others that are very different than them?
Well, so first of all, I mean, bias is something that's, at least the unconscious bias is something that's in all our brains. It's a very natural human thing, and it's very hard to avoid it. That's just because our brain runs usually on autopilot to save resources. And to make it easier for the brain to process certain information, it uses well-known trails. It's like a beaten path. And it just uses it again and again, and the more often it uses it, the deeper it gets and the harder it gets to erase it, right? So as a human being, the only thing you can do is being aware of this, that you are biased, that you are looking through a filter on the world. And I think what influences your bias is your environment. So basically, if you have a very diverse environment, you are used to consider different perspectives. But if you have a very homogeneous environment, you're not. So you have only a few or limited perspectives you're considering. So one thing you can do is just ensure you have a diverse environment. So talk to people you usually do not not consider, or
Or they disagree with.
Or disagree with, actually, exactly. So look for people you disagree with, very like on purpose, and try to have a conversation with them. And that's also the reason why it is so important that we increase the diversity in the AI industry, because at the moment the AI industry, or the people that work there, are not very diverse. I mean, there's a very low percentage of women working here. It's actually mainly white males in a certain age. So this is a very homogeneous environment, and you don't have someone who can double check, like the soap dispenser you mentioned. It's just like, I just consider myself as just natural. Like, and you always go from your own start from your own perspective.
Well, they're the first person they test it with. Oh, it works. Let's ship it.
Exactly. So that's why a diverse environment, especially in those industries, is very important.
I think one of the things that I found interesting is from a book from David Deutsch about, I think it's called Beyond Infinity, where they go a lot of like research on what it done to like human progress. And one of the things that he says, like, we always start with sort of like our worldview, and then we start doing research to kind of trying to confirm that, right? There's very little scientists that go in and they say, I'm going to try to disprove what I'm doing, right? They're trying to like prove that their theory kind of works, and trying to find information for it. And I think it's like one of the other things like this is like so important to what often goes wrong in science is that there's a bad explanation to things, and there's like a good explanation to things. And a good explanation is more like the open-minded thing to keep multiple variables at count, but often is also most of the time the most simplest explanation, right? And I think one of the things when I saw that, right, like when, for example, the soap dispenser, I was like, how on earth didn't they test it with different people? Because I think there's always going to be a challenge that, like, also the products that we all make, right, they come from our ideas or the collective ideas, and we think this is a great idea, and you're trying to put it out there. And then I think what you said is like putting it out to people who are, disagree with you can be your hardest critics. And I think one of the other things is when it comes to like the neural pathways that you're talking about, to sort of like the unconscious and the conscious mind, is that in order for us to like change our behavior, right, we need to kind of like change it into a habit, instead of like, oh, I'm trying to do this one thing right now to solve the problem. It costs too much energy, we can't keep up. So what are, for example, let's say, how can you make simple changes to, for example, reduce some of the biases, whether it's like, for example, with hiring, or like your confirmation bias towards an idea, that you think can help people to sort of like, okay, just trying to make this a habit as a team, for example, to get into that, right? So you get these different perspectives of people.
I mean, the first thing you need to do is not to pretend you already know the solution. So, I mean, this is pretty common, and it happened to myself. Like when I was involved in my first research project, I was actually a leader at that time, a team leader. And as a team leader, I had this image of myself that I need to have the solution for everything, right? This was my role. I need to know everything. I need to have the solution. I'm a problem solver for my team to make it go forward. So I went into this research project. This was more or less off topic at the very first time I was involved in an environment like that. And I was trying to use the same behavior, which is ridiculous, because if it's research, you don't know the answer.
Yeah, that's the whole point of the research.
Yeah, and
right?
you're not supposed to know it. Yeah. So, but I stumbled upon it. Yeah, I tried to manage the research, and it was actually a tough one. Yeah, it was an ego thing to admit, okay, I don't know the answer, and I need to be open. And I think that also fits for the situation you described, that I'm looking for a new employee, and I don't want to be biased. Don't pretend you know from not talking or before even talking to someone who is the right candidate. Just be very open, like also considering the CV. You look at a CV and you see certain things where you already have an opinion, right?
Yeah, certain logos of companies or education. Think, they're great, they're from Stanford, let's
absolutely.
do this.
Also something I experienced when I was starting my career, I was actually working as a secretary, and I was in subcontracted employments. But through those subcontracted employments, I worked for BMW, Coca-Cola, I worked for pretty big companies, but I was doing like very simple stuff. However, later on, people looked at my CV and they saw BMW, they saw Coca-Cola, and I got this massive respect, like, wow. And it didn't feel like that at all. And yeah, so there is a certain conception when you look at certain brands and you look at a CV that this person, you know, just because the person worked there, the person must be better than someone else. But that's not always the case, right? You always need to consider how long has the person been there and what exactly were the tasks, what were the conditions. So you need to consider a lot of data, and actually we are usually too convenient to do that. I'm not sure convenient is the right word here, but
lazy maybe.
Lazy, too lazy to do that. So
or time constraints, right? Lazy may be the bad word because I think there's a lot of like talent manager, HR that like, no, I'm not lazy at all.
Well, if you're under time pressure, you're under time pressure and you need to make a decision fast, so you don't consider too much data. You don't consider all data points you should consider. And that's to reduce the data amount in total, basically. And this can lead to a wrong decision making, actually. Yeah. So openness and choosing the right data and the right information you need to involve in the decision to make it fair.
And what, for example, have you seen as like good identifiers for people to say that they can grow a lot in an organization? Because there's always a starting point, right? We notice this ourselves. We anonymize candidates as far as we can, and then everybody gets to go through like a test, right? To kind of just see what the skill level is of somebody in a high time pressure. And then, of course, like there's people who pop out. For example, we have now somebody that we got from Namibia that perform better than the people here at Zalando and SoundCloud engineers. And he learned this stuff via YouTube, right? And he had no credentials whatsoever, right? And I think I'm curious, like what you found as like good identifiers. If you don't look at that, like what are the traits that you've seen in people you work with that you think, fuck, they can basically learn anything?
Well, that's a tricky one. I think it's again, the intrinsic motivation and the passion. So if you have a very high intrinsic motivation to do this job, for whatever reason, it can be to make your overall situation, improve your overall situation, but it can also be because the topic is so passionate about the topic, then you are able to learn anything. That's my theory, actually. But how to identify? I think I hired a few people in my life. I had a few job interviews, and what I'm looking at usually is like this is a certain spark. Like you talk to people and you can see it in their eyes, or you can see it in your behavior that they are driven by something. And this is usually a good sign. Not saying this is the ultimate solution, because of course you can fake it, but it's just someone who's really interested in doing this job behaves differently in a job interview than someone who just sees this as one of many job interviews to get in and earn some money.
And on like the day-to-day, like can you see, for example, already patterns emerge in the first couple of months when somebody starts? They think like, okay, what are the actual behaviors people are showing?
Questions. They're asking questions. They put things in question. They look at the process and they say, why don't we do it different? I think we could do more by just changing our processes, for example. People who are asking questions, and of course also people who do stuff. So it's not just about asking, but it's also about proactively doing things. But I need to say that it's crucial. It's not just the employee who plays a role here. It's a culture of the company. In which environment am I in? Am I free to
question everything? Yes.
Exactly. And also, does this company support me in learning more? Because there are a lot of companies that don't invest at all in training their employees, and I think that's a huge mistake. So I personally consider learning more as an extremely high. It's a motivation factor for me. So I'm happy in a job only if I can learn, and maybe it's not just learning what I need to do anyway, but it's also something that has nothing to do with my actual job. So if I can see there's something I can learn to improve, it's a motivation factor. But this is, again, motivation is a different topic. Motivation is something that's very individual.
Yeah. Do you, for example, believe you can motivate people, or do you think, well, no, it needs to come from within you? The best you can do is demotivate people?
the best.
Or the worst you can do. Well, I think maybe I said that wrong. I think it's like I think it's like one of my theories, right? I don't believe much in like motivational stuff. It's more like it comes from you if you have the right environment. But it's really easy to demotivate people, right? If you look at the law of like entropy, is that it's super easy to do stupid stuff, right? And so it's also a lot easier to create bad things than it is to create good things. And I think it's a bit of the same with like motivation, but I'm curious what you think.
So what I try to do, I don't think I have found the key to this, but it's also something I'm thinking a lot about. But what I think what works is you need to figure out what drives the person, what makes this person happy in a work environment, and just enable this person to work in that way. So if you know someone is an independent worker, just go out of the way, yeah. Just say, hey guy, I trust you. I think you have the skills we need. Yeah. Go for it, right? And if you need anything, let me know. And just be there if you get approached, but not get involved too much, like as a boss, so to say. So it's also something I think Steve Jobs said that, right? You need to hire the right people, and you go out of their way.
Yeah. Hire people smarter, and you let them tell you what
exactly,
to do.
Something like that. So I really like that quote, and that's actually what I experienced with my last boss at Zalando. He basically, he gave me space, and he just let me do my thing. And of course there were OKRs we aligned on, and there were regular check-ins, but in the meantime he didn't bother me. He just let me do my thing, and if I needed him, this was the important thing, if I needed him and I approached him, he was there. And I think this was something that motivated me a lot. And that's what I'm trying to do right now with my new team at EyeEm. And I don't know if it works, because I've just been there for 8 months. But this is the current approach I'm following.
And how do you, for example, capture in the feedback from the team to see, like what you can do better yourself as a team lead?
So feedback is extremely important. Feedback is extremely valuable. It needs to come like bottom up. So it needs to be top down, but also bottom up. It needs to be an exchange from both directions. I always encourage them to be very open. I always encourage them to be critical. If someone tells me in a weekly meeting everything is fine, I'm just saying, okay, so everything is perfect. And then usually they start, okay, no, perfect, not because. So I encourage them to be honest. And the tricky thing here is to not just make them look at everything with a negative perspective, because of course you can find a mistake if you're looking for it. Again, I'm not sure I've found the perfect solution yet, but that's what I'm trying at the moment.
And what is your vision, for example, for the future when it comes to like helping people facilitate that conversation a lot better, and their learning like through technology and maybe specific AI? Like, what's your view on that?
There are a lot of different feedback tools you can use to gather feedback, and also to guarantee a certain anonymity. However, I have a very small team. With a very small team, a tool doesn't make sense from my point of view, because it's just not anonymous. You would always be able to tell.
You can figure it out.
So
I remember this typo pattern.
So with a small team, I think it's even more important to create this open culture, or this atmosphere, and showing them that it's okay to be open, and it's okay to criticize. It's actually good to criticize. It's also actually good to make mistakes and talk about it, because mistakes are the thing that make us learn, right? So we need to fail in order to get better. And you need to transport this message and live that message. So even as a lead, I need to admit that I'm making mistakes, because I do. Everyone does. We're human beings. So talk openly about your own mistakes, and but also tell them, okay, that's what I learned from it, and that's what I will do different next time, and show them the improvements. I mean, being basically a role model. That's what I think. How it works in a small team. With bigger teams, yes, you need technology for sure. And then actually being anonymous can also help people to be more open. And then I also actually like the approach Zalando had. I think it's coming originally from Google, where you have like not one person deciding about, for example, promotions.
Oh yeah, the committees that you were talking about.
Yeah, or about being a top or low performer, or which kind of trainings you need to get better, but also having a committee there that makes this decision and not one single person. Because talking about bias, of course, it
gets in the way.
And that's why I like these committees, because they actually consider different perspectives, right?
And how, for example, do you see AI will play a role in that for the future?
Oh, this is a tricky one. I haven't actually looked into this. I know it's a huge topic, evaluating your employees with the help of AI, but I really openly need to say I haven't looked into this topic.
What do you think would be the dangers maybe of using AI for this?
Well, again, it can be biased. I mean, there's one very popular example actually, which is, I think, from the US, where there is an evaluation of teachers. So basically they were trying to find out which teachers are good and which are bad teachers, and how they improve or not improve the performance of the students, of the pupils. Actually, the system didn't consider all data points and led to some very questionable decisions. So some teachers were fired. Although they were, for example, extremely popular among the community. This was also because the machine, for example, or the algorithms did not consider stuff that plays a role. So, for example, if a student is performing very well in one quarter, and then there's a divorce, so the parents get a divorce, or I don't know, the brother gets in trouble, there are some private problems which influence the performance. This is not considered. However, the overall performance of the class may drop, and then this is related to the teacher. You know, it's a good example to show how complex
how quick it can go wrong as well, right? I think there's also this thing where we always think people bring a different human being to work, but in essence we're the same. Maybe we walk a bit differently and talk a bit differently, right? But I think that's where often the confusion happens. Like you say, like if there's something going on in someone's personal life, why should you fire the person because of that, right? Like how could you help with that?
I think what I said earlier also is valid here. So like the algorithm or the AI, if you want to call it like that, just provides another piece of information. But what we do with this piece of information is still a human decision, and it's something we should consider. Machines are not always right just because their recommendations are based on data. So there's so much you can put in question, although it was produced by a machine.
And what is something that you most of the time trying to make people aware of, like in their day-to-day, what are the things that you value in other people?
What I value in other people is curiosity and openness. Actually, that's also always something. If I'm looking for team members, it's something I'm looking for. So, are you curious? Are you putting things in question? Do you have this drive, this inner motivation to find a solution? And I had a few colleagues that really, had this attitude, and I still consider them some of my best teammates. And I'm really curious to see where they will go in their life. So because I think people like that, they go far.
Is there some way that you found that you can sort of like spark curiosity in people?
I think it always needs to come from inside. Like if it's not coming from inside, it's not real. So yes, of course, if you introduce them to new stuff is always important, right? Because learning new stuff or seeing a new perspective inspires you and makes your brain move, basically. So exposing people to new impressions, this is maybe something that could spark curiosity, But in the end, it needs to be something from inside.
Because it's funny when you said at the beginning that it was just the new technology from Pinterest, the visual search that kickstarted you, right, in a way. So I mean, this was new. It was new, and it had a massive effect
on me. I mean, it was just me. There were others who were looking at it and said, "Oh, whatever."
No, whatever. Yeah, stupid feature.
Nice. Who cares? Pinterest, old social channel. No one cares about Pinterest. So this is a highly individual decision. That's what I mean when I say it needs to be in you. So no one can force you to be curious. No one can force you to be inspired. That's something that's within you. And I think in an ideal case, you have a job that goes in the direction of something that sparks your curiosity, because then you can be the best in that field, and you're not, so even more important, you're happy with that, or at least satisfied.
It's a beautiful note to end it with. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It was really interesting to see how it all started with like a small thing and where you get now at EyeEm. Thanks so much, Tina, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Blindfeed podcast. We hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. Subscribe to our future episodes, and please share with us your thoughts or questions or any of the insights that you might have to community@blindfeed.com. Bye-bye.